Hello, tribe. Good morning. Hey, Debza.
Hey, how are you?
You're out here, say, how do you identify Pimvilo Mfulo?
Ooh, tricky already.
Yes, we're getting straight in.
I would say Mfolo.
Why?
It is my matriarch lineage. That's where my mom comes from. So my umbilical cord
Inkaba yakho.
ilapho.
Nazo, okay.
That's right.
Okay, because I was like, this guy must choose. Angahlale fencing. So today we have Tebogo Moalusi in studio, and we're speaking about the creative economy. And this is something that I know he is very passionate about because besides sitting here with him today, I know him from the business world, and we've interacted on creativity specifically. As I typically do, my name is Buyi Mafoko. I'm a seasoned entrepreneur, a luxury consultant, as well as a speaker. And what we do here, if you're tuning in for the first time, is really just setting out to unpack Africa and luxury and how the two sort of come together. Africa and Luxury is a luxury education platform, and we're really just setting out to chronicle the story, the definition, as well as drawing context and connection with the tastemakers that shape it. And we certainly have somebody here in studio, and I have no doubt it's going to be an interesting conversation. Today, as I've mentioned, my guest is Tebogo Moalusi, out here say, Fulo Central. And Debza, as I call him, has a passion for the creative industries and is the founding executive of M&M Marketing Solutions, a marketing, brand activation, and events management company. He's also a successful business professional, creativepreneur. Guys, we're always getting new language in this episode. So you're going to have to explain to us and get it and just unpack that a bit for us. And a social activist. He's worked at various levels in leading investment banking, management consulting, private equity, ICT, as well as insurance companies, primarily in business development, marketing, and sales. Whilst in corporate SA, before his major pivot, which we'll also talk about, he founded the Young Professionals Forum, so always already starting that career in activism very early on in his career, with the goal of empowering young professionals with a better understanding of economic, social, as well as political issues. Additionally, he also founded Bagamoso Cross Mentorship Program, which he led for 12 years, both entities focused on youth development. Over and above that, he's founded several businesses and thrives to build new organizations through ideation, strategy, visioning, and partnership development. He holds a BCom Economics and Law degree from UCT, or the University of Cape Town, where he also served as the Treasurer General in the Student Representative Council. He also holds an MBA from GIBS, or the Gordon Institute of Business Science, specialising in entrepreneurship. So really just like a very wholesome human being that we're speaking here today. Talk about a career pivot. Tebogo is currently the Gauteng Convener and member of the National Coordinating Team for Rise Mzansi, which is building a movement of patriotic South Africans by organising, mobilising, and empowering citizens. Some of his notable accolades include being one of the brightest minds, SA Minds, as well as Destiny Man Top 40 under 40, amongst others. So I always ask my guests, how does it feel when you hear about yourself?
I feel proud. I think I've journeyed and achieved a few things. So, and I'm an expression of many people's dreams and prayers. So I'm not proud only for myself. I'm proud for my family. I'm proud for my community, and everybody who holds me in high regard. I think our reputation is a very important part. When we talk about luxury, reputation is luxury, right? And so my reputation is embedded in the profile that you've shared, and also rings and echoes in the rooms that I have been in and the ones that I will be in future. Yeah.
You are such a well-rounded human being, because not many people are able to just be so seamless in what they do, but consistent as well. And I think what was compelling for me and for us to have this conversation, I mean, I know your earlier work, which is Obrigado, and we'll speak about that as well. because you guys have come upon a major milestone, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
I also, you and I specifically interacted professionally when we were working with Fam Academy, which is the brainchild of Laduma, Black Coffee, as well as Nelson Magamo. And so I've experienced you personally as well, because I know your wife and your family, and you just are the same person, which is so interesting, because we wear so many hats, but I guess struggle with the personas. I think some people struggle with turning themselves on and off, and I really appreciate that about you.
Thank you.
So shall we get straight into it?
Let us. Let's dance.
So, as I earlier mentioned, we're talking about the creative economy. And in South Africa specifically, the creative economy is a key and an important driver of economic growth and employment. And of course, we know we're faced with a major, I think, issue or challenge right now of unemployment in the country. It has the potential to address youth unemployment as well as other economic inequalities, especially in marginalized communities. The country's diverse cultural heritage, strong artistic talent, and digital opportunities make it fertile for ground-up industries to develop. The creative economy, spans multiple sectors such as art, design, fashion, film, music, advertising, gaming, publishing, architecture, as well as digital media. So, and I want to front load our conversation with that very broad sort of synopsis of what the creative economy is, and really just get in and ask you what role, because you're quite involved actually in the creative economy, what role do you see the creative economy playing, as well as shaping just the discourse in South Africa, and I suppose the continent, because we are actually quite a very creative geography, aren't we?
We are. So let me start by what is the definition of creativity for me. And outside of the technical kind of aspects, it's that which connects us to ourselves, to each other, and to God, right? So it locates itself in a spiritual realm, and that's why I think creativity is such a powerful thing. I always say that creativity is the closest thing to godliness, because where there was nothing, all of a sudden there's something. Before this platform, there was nothing. It was just we doing many other things. But when you stepped into your creativity to create this platform, all of a sudden there's an integration of voices. You're getting to travel. There is cultural diplomacy. There's so much that comes with that. So godliness in itself, when you are not born, you are just in the spiritual realm, but you come to be born into the universe, and all of a sudden there's everything, right? And
an abundance of
self, because we are unique in our own individual identity.
Love that.
As much as we may be part of 7 billion people in the world, there is only one Tebogo. And that is a phenomenal spiritual expression. And so creativity is a physical manifestation of that. And
I
when
love that so much.
Yeah, when we sit in how important that is, then we start to understand how important the creative economy is. Because essentially it locates us in the essence of humanity. But what we haven't been able to do before is, yes, we have respected the spiritual realm of creativity, but what I think is important for Africa is to move to the commercialization of our creativity. Because truly creativity is our superpower.
So
know, if you look at young Africans, from the moment we were born, they put on some music in the kitchen before you can even be on your feet.
There's such an ingenuity.
Your body moves because it comes out of you as a part of our DNA.
It's a meeting of self.
Exactly.
Isn't it? When you speak about manifestation, it kind of, you're manifested from the spiritual into the physical realm. But yet it's what's your perspective? And that's such a beautiful and a new introduction for me of what creativity is. And perhaps I haven't fully meandered through, because one works in creativity, so you just innately know what it is. And so thank you for sharing that. But what's your view on Africans, and when you speak especially about the commercialization of it, how we kind of are giving away this superpower for free?
So I think it's a function of business science and the maturity or the understanding of Africans to business as a science. I think we have deepened our creative capacity, and I think that's why you have a plethora of young people, old people across the divide who are able to contribute creatively. But because of the indictment of access to quality education, we haven't been able to blend that with the science of business, to build markets, to properly price, to almost connect your product to a market, to build partnerships. All of these things we take for granted because how do you price spirituality? How do you price vulnerability?
Because it's so ephemeral, like it's pervasive, but also when you live in a continent that's as abundant as ours,
yes,
with creativity, it feels like it's not a commodity that you can commercialize.
Exactly.
Because everybody has a natural, well, not everybody, especially not me, have a natural inclination to sing or dance or like whatever, or write a story or like be a beautiful orator. How do you actually then evaluate your craft into something that can be commercially packaged for trade?
I think you have to first trust the value that you present to the world. Part of what you've shared is, when you live in abundance, it's like Africa being the breadbasket of the world. When food grows around you, it doesn't come to be that you actually can take this to the market and price it.
Yeah.
But when you start to understand that economy and economics is about scarcity, you're able to start thinking around art, creativity, and spirituality as a scarcity in a competitive landscape. And so it does require a bit of a dimension shift, which is how do I understand economics as a baseline? And that has to do with supply and demand. It has to do with pricing. It has to do with markets, competitive landscapes, both local and internationally. And so once you're able to understand how all of those forces integrate, you're able to then price based on what you think your value is. It's important that we protect the sanctity of the spiritual nature of creativity, but it must also sustain us so that we can keep giving that to ourselves, to our children, and the generations to come.
Yeah.
And so the economic sciences, the business sciences, is what brought me to creativity in the first place. As you read my bio, I'm a corporate professional.
Yeah, like law, economics, creativity.
Right. And for me, the half gap was I had served and serviced corporates and business as well. And I saw that the one thing that, or many things, but one of the key things that's missing in the creative sector was that business science, and allowing and giving people a toolbox of how to take their creativity and help it participate in the mainstream market. So that's I think what the opportunity is, and where I think the lack has been, is to develop creativity to become a commercially viable proposition that can compete locally and internationally.
And you spoke about education as probably the shortcoming for how we sort of strategize and package ourselves, and even just the perception, or to be perceptible to our creativity as something that's can be commoditized. What are some of the and I'm really asking you this now, you wearing your sort of public servant hat.
Sure.
What are some of the government policies that are in place that have impacted the growth, perhaps, of the creative industries?
So I think the first one is the Constitution. We've got a beautiful Constitution. Lots of people will say many things about its shortcomings, but as a document, as an instrument to govern a people in a constitutional democracy, it's actually very powerful. It gives us things like the freedom of expression. It gives us things like access to infrastructure in order to participate in the mainstream economy. So that's the first anchoring kind of instrument. The second
It's like
is
a cardinal tool that we all have to kind of and I mean, let's get into that a bit, because especially we've just gone through the elections last year.
Yeah.
And I see your WhatsApp stories, and I obviously follow your work, and you guys were doing such a compelling job
Yes.
at the education of even just the Constitution, because I've been South African all my life.
Yeah.
And I don't think I knew it to the extent.
Right.
So, and it's around the communication aspect, I guess, of creativity. that you guys were able to do that? Was it deliberate on your part?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, goes back to my initial point of what is creativity? Is connecting with self, connecting with others, and with community. And communication does that. It's how you join the dots. And we realized that what was missing was accessibility to politics. I think for the last 30 years, there has been this apprehension for people to engage with politics. And actually, when I talk to people, I say everybody's a politician. For as long as you're navigating choices and alternatives and making options for yourself, for your community, you're engaging in politics. There's corporate politics, there's sports politics, there's creative politics, and then there's the political party discourse that we see.
Right.
And we wanted to make politics accessible again and make people realize that every single day that you are breathing, you are engaging in the process of choosing what you want for your life and what you want for the people that you love. And therefore, you're a politician. So that was the first thing. The second was, I think because people have had a negative experience of politics, it carries a very negative label. And what we've actually seen from a data point of view is that there's a decline in the number of people who are registering to vote and who are turning out to vote on the day.
Yeah. And that's global, isn't it?
It's global.
Because I saw it with them. I saw it play out with the American elections as well.
Correct. And what it's doing, so in 2021, which was the local government elections, or let's go 2019, it was sitting at 66%.
The registration or the voting?
This is the voter turnout. Okay. In 2024, which is May last year, we were sitting at 57%. So there's almost a 10% differential or decline in the number of people turning out to vote. And what that does is it starts to delegitimize democracy, because only just over half of South Africans are participating in choosing the government of the day. The rest are staying away and saying, we actually don't buy into
they are complicit. Because also there's a despondency. I think if we were to value, brands are evaluated every day. When you look at the brand of politics, there's been a lack of, people have lost the trust, in terms of what the product or the politics are selling. And how have some of your, and as I mentioned earlier, you're part of Rise Mzansi and you've been very central, a new party that I think is doing really compelling things. And what has shaped some of your policies as an organization that really is challenging the discourse that we've come to know and see as South Africans with politics? Because I think the themes are applicable to the rest of the continent and its politics, aren't they?
Sure, absolutely. And so to go back to the initial point, getting more people to participate in politics is about getting more people to lead who look like the demographic, right? Our leadership is currently too old.
Yeah.
It is too homogenous in the sense that it came from one political party, and therefore there wasn't a diversity of thought. It is too male, which means that you cut out almost half of the population's thinking in contributing to how we shape politics. And so even in maleness, you also bring in a masculinity, which is positive in some instances, but there's so much value in feminine energy leadership that we are missing out from. And yet we all come from families which were run by women.
Inzala Bantu.
Like
to translate it, because we've got listeners from all over, Inzala Bantu meaning literally the creators of humanity, are women. And just that intuitive nature, because when you speak about spirituality as well, that intuitive nature that women have for some of the very sort of ego-driven, cut and dry decisions that get made for a country, for an economy, benefiting, I think, in the participation, the increase of women involvement could really benefit that diversity, that broadness of thought, that, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. When we started, you asked me, how do I identify home, or where do I identify
you
as
said
home?
your
And
mother.
I said Mfulo.
Yeah.
Right? That because there's something special about the relationship we have with feminine energy. And yet we haven't been able to access that as a superpower to define how we want to build our communities. And so in Rise Mzansi, part of the work was to introduce some of these new elements to leadership, a younger, more dynamic political discourse, a feminine energy-driven political discourse, a youthful energy, a competent energy. And you know, the idea that we must leave varsity and enter into corporate and that becomes the basis of our existence was what agitated me and said, look, you need to contribute at the most important spaces that define South African life. And that's not going to be in a bank or in a gallery. It's going to be in civil society. You need to go in there and make a contribution to turn the ship around. And once the context has become a lot more fertile, even business becomes a beneficiary of that. You know, we are business people. And if you think about it strategically, the value that we build erodes every single year for as long as we've got a dysfunctional government. It doesn't matter how much money you make. If you're constantly having to live in a dual reality of private transport, private kind of estates, private education, private healthcare, private security, you have to have borehole water, you must put solar system in your homes. So what you're doing is you're still paying 41%, 42% tax, right, to the state.
Damn.
And you are still paying to sustain your life in another parallel universe, which is these private institutions. Then where's the money left for you to invest, to grow, to save, to travel, to self-actualize?
I have never looked at it from that perspective.
So you're double counting and doubling investing in the basics of your life.
What you're entitled to.
Exactly, because you're paying for it. If we made sure that the 42% works for us, right, which is the money that we pay at the top end of our tax brackets, if we made sure that that works, we wouldn't need private education. We wouldn't need private healthcare. So it would take down the contributions we have to make to some of these, support services drastically. Imagine you had 50% more of your money.
I mean,
hey, what would that do for luxury?
Like on this continent,
right? And so
on this continent,
we are squandering resources by not having an effective political discourse and government, and that's what agitated me.
That is so enlightening. And now you've traveled the country quite literally. And have seen youth, the elderly, small business people, big business, different geographies, developed, underdeveloped. You know, what is your view on the South Africa you see? And I know we're speaking because you're a politician in South Africa, but I do want to, I think your response will probably give us insight on the rest of the continent too.
Sure.
After that experience, what is your observation?
Yeah. There's a lot of pain. I think the common theme across all sectors of society, irrespective of whether you're rich, poor, black, white, abled people with disability, there is a tremendous amount of pain, prolonged pain. We have lost too much. We have lost it too often. The last 30 years, I mean, we are young adults.
Yes. Yes, Debza.
Right. And
depends which dictionary you ask. Yes.
Right. And if you think about the last time you felt economic prosperity in this country, where things were buzzing, employment was relatively at a decent level, the quality and standard of life was good. That was like, just pre-2010, So from 2011, 2012, we have been in stagnant growth, sometimes going backwards. Unemployment has been increasing, particularly for young people, for women, for black people. The level of degradation is increasing. You go to Johannesburg City today, it's a ghost of its former self. Never did we think that a world-class African city could ever look the way that it does. When you don't have a basic input like water, you can't run a restaurant. It's hygienically impossible to run a restaurant that serves people on a day-to-day basis. This is people's livelihood. So when I talk about pain, I talk about 2011, 2012 to 2025 worth of pain. We have been simmering
compounded
in this loss and this deep sense of we're going to get through it, and then we don't, and then we get a president, then he disappoints us, then the world goes in flux and the geopolitical platform goes haywire, right?
How do we address that?
And it's a mess. So there's a lot of pain. That's what I have experienced, and it manifests itself in the visible and visceral things that we see. People's homes, for many people in South Africa, having a meal a day is a luxury.
Guys.
It is the dignity of food and the indignity of hunger is something that we're grappling with after 30 years of democracy.
Damn.
In a country where we have over R1 trillion of GDP every single year. We're about to have the budget speech again because we didn't have it previously because there was a deadlock. But think about that and think about who is complicit in the continuance of this pain that we experience. More than 1.3 trillion a year for the last 15 years, and we can't create jobs. A young person who finished matric and university in 2012 is likely to continue to be unemployed and unemployable today. The indignity of never being able to see a pay slip in your life. Can you imagine waking up and being 47, having your sunrise years behind you, and knowing that you don't have the youthful capacity in order to participate effectively in the economy, to provide for your family, to be umjita who goes to a shop and puts money at a till and says, I want groceries to take to my home, and watch your kids and your partner look at you with that deep sense of love and dignity. It's no wonder men, particularly black men, are so broken in this country. The levels of violence, GBV that we see is untenable because the system itself is violent to blackness. It's violent to men. It's violent to young people.
Not a South African issue.
That's what we experience.
Yeah. And I think as a continent which is predominantly black, but also a brand of blackness that has been put out as purposefully painting the picture of violence and degradation and just completely tearing that down is really saddening because we are still very much collectivist societies. And we are on this platform, obviously we talk about luxury, but not in the material sense.
Yes.
And therefore I think about just how there's a dysfunction even in the umjita who manages to creep out of what is sort of the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
An environment like that is not enabling because there's 100 others of his peers who don't wish him well, potentially, or who can't celebrate him for his successes. And therefore he moves himself into an estate. He moves himself into high walls and stuff like that. And I think it is one of the things that challenges and plagues me every day when I think about, really, is luxury purely just buying brands? It cannot be.
Yeah.
It cannot be. And I think to be able to participate economically just within your household, just within your community, is how granular I think we are failing, is the level at which we are failing people. Some of your other observations as you move around, just around where, let's not paint such a gloomy picture. Where are some of what is the optimism that you can give us from the picture that you saw as you were traveling across the country?
So lots of beauty. You see, the thing about the African way and the African experience is it's not just only a biological and archaeological fact that humanity began in Africa, right? That means something. And what I found is a lot more of our humanity starts to come out at times of strife.
Okay.
When communities know that they have to band together to make means with what they have, humanity shows up. When you have to make a plan, when a man make a plan, that's where creativity comes alive. And so as part of the pathway to break this crisis that we find, you find that there's a lot of creativity. You find that there's a lot of humanness. You find that there is a lot of empathy and connecting to the idea that in order to survive, we have to do this thing together.
Yeah.
And that's really what we saw. Ingenuity,
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that even mainstream media doesn't have the time to tell the stories of how people actually make means and how they solve for problems. But we have amazing problem solvers.
Yeah. Such innovation that just is raw.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's about containing that energy and utilizing that energy and leveraging it and putting it on a global stage.
Yeah.
Amapiano,
Yeah.
which is a global phenomenon now, right? Is born out of that ingenuity that I speak about. Amapiano was not created in a high-end suburb in some high-end studio. It was young girls and guys,
Pitori, right?
Kokasi, yeah,
Victoria,
who were just like, yo, we want to try this lock drum thing and we want to create a way of life around this music. And now it's taken the world by storm, and that's what I talk about when I talk about this ingenuity. And it's not just Amapiano. There's so many other things out there that would demonstrate that creativity is our superpower. We just have to be able to build platforms and vehicles to be able to unearth those stories. And by playing that back to people, we restore their sense of power, dignity, and agency, because they start to see that I actually am of value. And when you convince someone that they are of value, they start building a sense of confidence, a sense of self-love, and they start to make different choices. There's two dimensions that I talk about that I'm starting to write about. On the one side, there's the crisis statement that says that alcohol, drug, and gambling abuse is the new triple threat that is stealing the future of South Africa.
Oh, damn.
Right? We know what is happening in kind of our almost one out of all those three is affecting almost every single family.
Yeah, just the excessive and overconsumption.
100%. So that's the crisis side. But the opportunity is what I call the Ubuntu economy. Right? The Ubuntu economy is made up of three components. It's the creative economy, it's the care economy, and it's the climate economy.
Wow, okay.
And those three offer us an opportunity to enable people who have not been trained to enter into the mainstream economy to actually have means in order to participate and earn a living. Think about how many people were raised by nurses, by teachers, policemen, by clerks of courts, that's the K economy. But social workers.
Yes.
Social workers were the very essence of what helped us deal with the generational trauma of apartheid. That's why you had social. You used to
I didn't know that.
You used to hear koka say, "Hey, mang social worker," and whenever there was an issue, there used to be an asset located in the society, in the community, to deal with some of these things that would happen. But we have now no longer invested in increasing the number of nurses, social workers, quality teachers, etc., etc. And there's a lower barrier of entry of educating people to become nurses versus educating them to become engineers.
Yeah.
And we are not using that as an opportunity. Creativity and the creative economy is the same thing. You give a young girl a camera and they are a business. They can earn 4, 5, 6, 7,000 rand a month, which enables them to do so much, and that's what the creative economy does. And then the climate economy has to do with energy management, with food management, helping people to grow their own food gardens, helping them to be energy independent, helping them to understand water management within their locality. And the one incredible thing about the Ubuntu economy is that it's located within the community. We have got deep spatial apartheid challenges which make movement very difficult. If Udula Koval and you have to travel to Sandton using 3-4 taxis, you spend 65% of your income on transport. And that's the reality for most Black people who live in the township but work in the city. Now, to flip that around is you need to build an economy that lives locally within the community. Teachers, nurses, social workers, all of those people are located in the primary healthcare system of a community. So they would get paid within their community, and you create that circling of value.
And just service is an innate value of Ubuntu, isn't it?
Yeah.
To serve each other.
Yeah.
Is quite an integral philosophy that we've grown up with.
Absolutely.
So we've actually disregarded care workers, if you want to call them that.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about it now to say I would opt to go to a further better school than to default to the local school because perhaps it's been degraded or whatever the sort of legacy challenges may be. And you've already spoken to one of my questions, which was around what are some of the skills we can give young people and just general like Africans.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about how entrepreneurship in the creative sector can be encouraged and sustained.
Yeah.
Because I know entrepreneurship has been quoted as being one of the major avenues in which we can address your unemployment and stuff like that. And as an entrepreneur myself and yourself, I think we speak with experience and practically around some of also the challenges that are posed against entrepreneurs. But what are some of the more positive things that entrepreneurship as a vehicle can do to address and to sustain creativity?
So entrepreneurship for me is the key to actually unlocking, Pandora's box positively. And it speaks to value creation. We have to empower people to understand what does it mean to create value. You can create things that are not of value.
Okay.
So part of it is understanding the context, understanding the need, responding to the need in an effective manner. I think what we do is we make business such a complex dynamic that the barrier to entry becomes psychological. It's like I could never see myself
like I'm hindered
as an
before.
entrepreneur. I mean, very few people can even spell the word. It's an E before U or U before E. but even that shows you that our language of business is inaccessible and inaccessible. And so the groundwork that we have to do is through simple interventions, get people to understand how they can take a very simple asset, whether it's intellectual capital or things they can do with their hands, and how that can build an asset of value. And how once you accumulate that and you find a market and you build a sense of confidence, you can actually start putting that into the market. And then there's partnerships. How do you build a small business? How do you work with people?
Yeah.
How do you build sustainable?
How do you collaborate with the complementary or own the value chain? And I think there's so many entrepreneurs. There's more entrepreneurs than people identify themselves as entrepreneurs.
Exactly.
And what is that? Because I think you've got, especially with Africa, when it comes to the world viewing Africa, our luxury is regarded as artisanal, crafty, sort of like devalued to just like, like I think of beads, which every geography across the continent has some iteration of a bead or beading. But it's so devalued. Like you'll never pay 10,000 rand for a beautifully beaded, necklace or whatever.
Yeah.
But pearls, on the contrary, are regarded as like, oh, the queen's pearls.
Yes.
So what has to change in people creating work that is crafted? Because I think there's craftsmanship there, which is a value of luxury. Beautifully crafted items, but just around the entrepreneurial then mindset to say, this thing can be. I'm looking at your shirt and I'm thinking of how beautifully Africa Your Time Is Now as a brand have managed to do that.
Yeah. It starts with language. We have always been eating organic, but somebody called it organic and then they put a premium on our food, and now we are even paying more for the technology that we developed.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, free range.
Yeah.
We've always been having it. We've been having free range.
Yeah, hot body is free range, guys.
Exactly. So the idea of how language gets embedded in indigenous knowledge systems and indigenous craftsmanship is something that becomes important. People like you and I, who are communicators, who are marketers, who are brand specialists, need to get and locate ourselves in the work of our people, and then attach labels to the work we do in a way that communicates something to the world. Earlier on, you defined me as a creativepreneur.
Yeah.
Right? That is a language. We are building a lexicon that allows people to see us in a certain way, right? That says I'm a creative and I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm bringing those two things together, right? And
So
I want you to
important.
identify me as that. And I need that IP to mean something. And I'm going to build your experience of me so
And the
that you
equity.
attach creativepreneurship to Tebogo, who is a competent, high-valued individual. And therefore, you start building the idea of creativepreneurship. And that becomes a luxury in itself. So I think that that's part of it. The second is ownership, right? And I think that's why we've got the Copyrights Amendment Bill, which is not signed as yet. But what it navigates is this concept of ownership. Creativity has always grappled with
who owns what?
Who owns what, and who pays for what, and who pays who for what. And we have to solve for that, because many of the things that we build don't get owned by us, and therefore value does not get exchanged to our direction. We give away too much of our culture without demanding
We're
value
appropriating
for it.
ourselves.
And we have to
before
start
the world even leans in to do that to us.
Absolutely. So when you think about Ulatuma, when you think about Nelson and what they have done in repositioning the world's view on luxury, that's exactly what they've done. They've built a global understanding of what is ours. And that you don't get to just take things from us, reprice them and sell them back to us. We're going to fight you, but we're also going to educate ourselves so that when we argue, we win not only on the basis of intellectualism, but also on building a sense of history. Because people, they mess around with history to try to create a narrative such that Africanism, Pan-Africanism does not locate itself in value. Africa is the basis of civilization. From the days of Mapungubwe, now we are being convinced that colonialism was the first introduction of technology to Africanism. I mean, we knew complex economic exchange at the time of the Mapungubwe people. And so we need to tell those stories and bring them forth so that when we engage in economic discourse, we empower people with a position of power so that you can demand a price for your good, because embedded in this cloth is a story. It's a story of 1,000,000 years. And therefore, when you buy it, you're not buying
right. Just like the epitome really of, and this is why I think it's so important that we draw the distinction and we label it as African luxury. Because I think to allow the rest of the world to own, because luxury is not something that is naturally associated to Africa. As you know, based on what you've mentioned as well. And the earlier point you made around educating people is that vocabulary, building that vocabulary store that starts to positively give perception, positively chronicle, is exactly what we're setting out to do here. So thank you for just, highlighting that. And how can creative industries play a role in social justice and activism in the country, which is, I think, what you get to do now every day. How do those sort of interact? And how should it become native actually to us? Because I think we are all creative, we're all gifted in some way, but how do we make sure that that becomes native to us as a people so that every day we're participating in what the creative economy is becoming?
We have to enable people to change their material conditions through creativity. I don't think that we can continue to preach creativity and our dominance in that space without making sure that it starts to materially change practitioners' lives, so creative practitioners, and the communities they come from. We just have too many artists, performers who make massive contributions and don't have, great wealth to show for it. I was looking at the book Still Grazing with Brahu Masekela, a giant. His creative technology is probably as profound as an Elon Musk. Right? And I want to pause because I want people to think about that. His creative technology is as profound as an Elon Musk. Because you have to understand the genius who gets given a trumpet in the middle of Soweto in abject poverty, who then gets to transform music globally forever. Forever, Brahu will be an icon who contributed as much as a Quincy Jones, as much as a David Foster.
No lies,
all of them.
No lies detected.
Right? But what is the estate and the material impact of Brahu's story? We should have 10 schools, one in each province, music schools that are taking young musicians through. right? So that moment where he got that trumpet gets given to thousands of other children.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I talk about when I talk about the generational wealth. And we have to do that. And part of that is infrastructure.
Yes.
You can't build a community of performing artists who don't have a theater to practice. It kills their dreams, and then they end up becoming secretaries at a bank somewhere. And there's nothing wrong about secretaries, but that was not their path.
Yeah.
They took that path because there wasn't a stage for them to show the world their superpower. You know, we see so many of these videos. Beyonce was dancing when she was 7 years old, but she also had the platform, right? And we need those
resources
platforms
and the infrastructure
100%
in order to be able to do that.
100%.
And
The
I
shared
mean-
services, you know, the two big challenges that translate policy into impact is, for example, the contract, right? We take for granted that instrument, that legal instrument that defines the exchange of value, is understood by everybody universally. How many of our artists have seen flames based
Still
on
today.
the quality of their contracting, right? So if we're
And
going
have
to
lost the ownership of their works.
Brenda Fassi,
Been embezzled and literally lost the ownership of their works due to poor just comprehension of, not even poor, no comprehension of the contracts.
Brenda
Because
Fassi
legal
is
jargon
Yeah.
manages to mask what the actual exchange of value is.
Exactly. So we as part of our broad contribution, when we talk infrastructure support services, is we should be building a legal firm that offers creatives legal support on the basis of contracting, right?
But also, on that point, we should also be building the legal firm that translates it to my vernacular language.
Absolutely.
Because I may understand the contract if you tell it to me in Swahili,
Yes.
but it's all in English and it's all jargony. You know what I mean? There's also a barrier there. And I generally lead my life with education and interact with the world through education and educating.
Yeah.
And so I really think that there's a huge barrier, even with communication, general communication disciplines, around localizing the content
Absolutely.
and the messaging that we're trying to give people.
Yeah. So legal is a great platform, and finance.
And finance.
Money. Money. We need to
say it in as many languages as you can speak. Zaga,
guys.
imali, chelete.
We need to empower people around the value of money and the values of money and how money works.
Yeah.
We need to teach people about leverage, how debt can be an incredibly empowering instrument if you use it correctly.
Yeah.
We need to talk around what equity structures are. There's so many people who sit in legal vehicles that are structured horribly, and therefore they are not able to extract value
from a financial
effectively,
outcome.
You know, so legal and finance have to be there as part of a broader infrastructure development plan to enable creatives to get closer to success. But to your question, we must solve for creativity changing the material conditions of people.
And what advice do you have for, youth looking to break into the creative economy? Because I think more so now than ever, and especially in the digital age, creativity is accessible. And there are other new crafts there are crafts being emerging as we speak, as we sit here, that are yet to be discovered. So what is some of, especially when you spoke to youth as you were, sort of traveling, what are their hopes? And how do we bridge those hopes with the creative economy and what it can do for them as an enabler?
Yeah. Their hopes is they want to be stars. I think they watch you on a YouTube channel and they're like, I want to be like Boy. She looks like someone that I aspire to be. And that's fantastic. But I think what needs to happen is a broad understanding of a sector. Is not just the people who are front of house, right? There's so much value that can come from playing different roles in the creative industry. And I think that's part of the investment that needs to be made, is that too much emphasis happens on the practitioners of the arts. So these are your sculptors, your singers, your DJs. What we need to build is industry, which is
Yeah.
the support functions that enable an industry
Really the
to happen.
scaffold that holds it all up.
Absolutely. When you go to some of the first world countries, there are banks that are specific for the creative sector. There are medical doctors, there are engineers, there are entire disciplines that help support the creative industry.
Yeah.
What we have is a very thin layer of practitioners
A facade, really.
who really just want to be famous.
Yeah.
It's really about the fame, which is not
Sustainable.
about the sector itself, you know. When you look at DJ Black Coffee and you think about how big is the institution that he runs, his company must employ over 300 people.
Oh, yeah.
To manage Black Coffee, the individual.
The one that you see.
The one that you see.
Yeah.
But there are incredibly well-paid individuals who do a myriad of things to enable Black Coffee to be on a stage in Ibiza doing what he does. And we need to build a sense of understanding that you can be other things within the sector.
Yeah.
So to your question, what do they say? They hope to be stars. And what do I say? I say it's okay to be a star, but it's also okay to do other things outside of being a star. So that's the first piece of advice. The second is we are stepping deeply into the kind of the intellectual and knowledge economy, right? The fourth industrial revolution is not kind of a thing that's coming. We are embedded in it right now.
We're transcending it, in fact.
Right? Yeah. So when we talk about robotics, when we talk about artificial intelligence and its integration and interaction with the creative industry, we need young people to start engaging with that. Gaming is probably bigger than acting. I think they said film and there's another sector put together.
Wow.
So gaming...
Really?
Yeah. Gaming as a sector is that huge.
Guys, we're busy shouting at kids for playing PlayStation.
They are building an economy.
These kids are coding things that we should be encouraging.
They are building an entire economy in front of our eyes. But we, because of our own disposition, we think that they are wasting time. What we need to be channeling is, what does this mean for their future? What are they gaming? Do they understand how a game works? Can they build their own game? What community of gamers do they belong to? Once you start doing that, you move what is a hobby into a practice, and you enable them to go down a path where they can now become coders, communicators, lawyers, designers you know, of games, right? So that's the second thing that I would add. The third is, you don't have to be one thing anymore.
Yes.
You know, we're moving into the world of the gig economy. Yes. And the gig economy allows you to have multiple professions at the same time. That's what I am. I'm a gig worker, right? I have bursts and sprints of work in a certain space. I could do a 3-week strategy with a massive company, right? Come out, write my report, get paid, and then come and do a podcast and then get paid for that. And then go and do a speaking opportunity and go and get paid for that. And then at the end of the day, it racks up and gives me the number that allows me to live the life that I want. And so it's about understanding your bouquet of strengths and starting to serve the world based on those different skills, that you don't have to just be this thing. There's so much more that the world needs.
You're the second guest that's actually mentioning that. There's an earlier episode that we launched within season 2 with Dion Chang, and he mentions exactly that. To say also, because we were speaking about it from a, like acquiring skills and learning, and how education needs to be intuitive to, like, there's micro learning now, there's self-learning, there's all of these sorts of things. But it's all now about building bouquets of skills, as you're saying. Yeah. And before we close, tell us about Obrigado.
Obrigado.
On a much lighter note.
Yeah, 10 years of Obrigado. We started Obrigado with two of my partners. They're both DJs, musicians, producers, the music and DJ Kenzero. 2014, we decided to create this platform. It's called Obrigado because Obrigado means thank you. But it really was about creating safe spaces for a feeling of gratitude.
Wow.
You know, we do so much work and we work hard for our money. We wanted people to find a space where they can come and thank themselves and thank their universe for their success. And so the music that we play really allows people to transcend time and space. It's very much a combination of Latin American influences and African influences.
Yeah.
And so we play bossa, Afrobeat, we mix those two, and which has given us a unique proposition to the market. And then in 2019, we flew 40 people to Brazil.
I saw that.
On a beautiful luxury travel. It was sold out in 4 weeks, and we still even had an above the line marketing strategy that we didn't deploy because of the belief and trust that people had in the Obrigado brand and experience. And for 7 days, we were in Brazil, Sao Paulo, and Rio. We hosted an Obrigado event in Brazil on Copacabana Beach on the 40th floor of a beautiful hotel. And it just, again, allows me personally to know that we are capable of building global African excellence, and people are willing to pay for it. I mean, the price point for that ticket was more than you would pay for a single travel if you're curating the trip for yourself. But people didn't want to do that. They wanted to travel with Obrigado because of what the brand represents. So now we are in our 10th year, and it's really about expanding back into the world of travel. Now that flights are open, the world is open. Post-COVID, we now want to reconnect to that whilst we still offer these unique South African experiences. I'm also cooking something. It's the G20 this year in South Africa, as you know. And we're going to be with a group of pioneers building the Creative 20.
The C20.
That's correct. Because
I've heard murmurs.
We must take advantage of this moment, but we must also build a vehicle that goes beyond this year. And so myself, as the convener, I'm working with a number of industry leaders and captains to build the C20, which will become a platform to engage globally in cultural diplomacy and to solve for some of the problems and challenges that we spoke about earlier. So look out for that, and hopefully we can join hands and build a formidable global entity across the 21 countries that are part of the G20 and see what we can do for the sector.
Well, thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. Obrigado.
Obrigado. And finally, what is your ultimate luxury?
Time. Time. It's the one thing that is difficult to master. Difficult to get back when it's lost, but when well invested, it yields the greatest dividends. And so time.
Quite a clear answer.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for making time to sit today. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you. It's a wrap.